Good morning. I'm Dr. Puneet. I'm dealing with the topic severe mitral stenosis with pregnancy. Etiology of mitral stenosis can be acquired, congenital, acquired can be rheumatic origin or due to the calcification, which occurs progressively over the age. Pathophysiology, mitral stenosis, main pathophysiology lies in the left atrium, increase in the left atrial pressure, and the left atrial dilatation. Increase in the left atrial pressure occurs due to pulmonary venous hypertension, pulmonary artery hypertension, right ventricular hypertrophy, right ventricular failure. LA dilatation leads to atrial fibrillation and stasis of blood. Stasis of blood leads to thrombus formation and systemic embolization. Coming directly to the complications, atrial dysrhythmias are very common. Systemic embolization occurs in 10 to 25% of the patients. Risk of embolization is related to the age, presence of atrial fibrillation, and previous embolic events. Congestive heart failure can occur. Pulmonary infarcts may occur as a result of severe congestive heart failure. Hemoptysis is seen secondary to the rupture of bronchial veins. Streaking, pink, frothy sputum may be suggestive of pulmonary edema, endocarditis, and pulmonary infections. These are the common complications that can occur in a patient of mitral stenosis. Dealing with atrial fibrillation, 30 to 40% of the patients with symptomatic mitral stenosis develop atrial fibrillation. Structural changes due to the pressure and the volume overload, they alter the electrophysiological properties of the left atrium. Rheumatic process may itself lead to the fibrosis of the internode and the intra-arterial tracts and damage the nodes. It is common in older patients, has a poor prognosis, 10-year survival rate of 25% with atrial fibrillation, 46% with sinus rhythm. Risk of arterial embolization or stroke is significantly increased if a patient has got atrial fibrillation. We have skipped this time the symptoms, the clinical features, the murmur, but straight away come to the investigations. So how will a ECG present in a patient of pregnancy with mitral stenosis? Axis, right axis deviation, right ventricular hypertrophy. P wave is broad and bifid in V1, lead 1 and lead 2. Inverted P wave is present in lead 3, or there may be absent P wave. Atrial fibrillation may be present. In QRS, there may be tall R in V1, and patient might have right ventricular hypertrophy. RR interval is varying with features suggestive of atrial fibrillation. In chest X-ray, there occurs straightening of the left border of the heart. The left border of the heart straightens due to the prominent pulmonary artery and left atrial appendage. There is a double shadow behind the heart, shadow within a shadow. It occurs due to the left atrial enlargement. Splayed carina occurs due to left atrial enlargement. Calcification may be seen because of mitral valve calcification. Then your famous curly ABC lines, curly B lines are dense, short, horizontal lines in the costophrenic angles and intra-airway septal thickening. Curly C occurs due to the reticular pattern throughout the lungs. Curly A are straight, dense lines up to 4 centimeters towards the hilum, suggestive of distended lymphatics. Pulmonary hemosiderosis may show itself as bilateral patchy alveolar infiltrates. Barium swallow may show sickling of the barium filled esophagus due to the compression by the enlarged left atrium. So we had an ECG, we had an X-ray, now we'll have the echo. So why and when to do an echo for? 2T and Doppler echo is the diagnostic tool of choice. It is used to detect the dilated left atrium, restricted diastolic opening of the mitral valve leaflets, doming of the interior leaflet, immobility of the posterior leaflet, and planimetry of the orifice can be done in the short axis view. So it has a class 1 indication for a diagnosis of mitral stenosis, mean gradient, mitral wall area, and the pulmonary artery pressure. You can also see if there is any concurrent wall lesion. You can comment upon the wall morphology. Most important thing is the presence of a left atrial thrombus. TE is indicated when the transthoracic echo is not able to provide a proper data or a suboptimal data is provided. Echo is reasonable in the re-evaluation of the asymptomatic patient with mitral stenosis and stable clinical findings to assess pulmonary pressure. It's a class 2A indication. Severe MS patients should have an echo every year, moderate MS 1 to 2 year, and mild patients with mild mitral stenosis should have it every 3 to 5 years. So what are the indications for a cardiac catheterization? Class 1 indication is if you want to assess the severity where non-invasive steps are inconclusive, or there is discrepancy between the non-invasive test and the clinical symptoms. To evaluate the severity of mitral regurgitation when there is discrepancy between the Doppler-derived mean gradient and the valve area. So what is it particular to the hemodynamics milieu in a pregnant patient? What happens to a patient with mitral stenosis in pregnancy that predisposes to the aggravation of symptoms? Itself, there are hemodynamic changes that occurs during pregnancy. There is increase in heart rate, there is increase in cardiac output, there is increase in blood volume, there is decrease in systemic vascular resistance. And while when a person has got a stenotic lesion, your hemodynamic goals should be to decrease the heart rate, to have adequate preload, to decrease the blood volume, and increase the SVR. So we see that the changes which hemodynamically occur in pregnancy are exactly opposite to the goals what we should have in your valvular stenotic lesion. So what should be our goals? Goals can be managed on a cardiac grid. We should try to maintain an adequate preload, a normal SVR. We should avoid increase in PVR. We should try to maintain a normal contractility. Heart rate, we should avoid tachycardia and try to maintain a sinus rhythm. So management of a pregnant patient can be divided into, depending upon the severity of MS, into medical management, into surgical management, into obstetrical management. Medical management mainly relies upon the usage of diuretics, beta blockers. If there is atrial fibrillation, then digoxin and anticoagulants. Of late, digoxin is being less used. Surgically, either you manage it with a valvuloplasty or a valve replacement. Obstetric management consists of delivery of the baby either vaginally or through a C-section. So, medical management of a patient with mitral stenosis consists of prophylaxis against rheumatic fever if rheumatic fever has been the cause of a stenotic lesion. avoidance of unusual stress. Rate can be controlled in atrial fibrillation by using beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, or digoxin. We should avoid pulmonary congestion, use diuretics and a salt-restricted diet, anticoagulation in presence of atrial fibrillation, endocarditis prophylaxis as per the latest guidelines. Anticoagulation should be used in MS if there is atrial fibrillation. In MS with prior embolic events, even in sinus rhythm, MS with the presence of a left atrial thrombus. Class 2B, symptomatic MS with left atrial dimension greater than 55 millimeter by echo. So how do you manage a patient on anticoagulants? Usually these patients are on warfarin. So whenever a patient is on warfarin, do a INR. If the INR is between 2 to 3 days, stop 4 days prior to the planned surgery. If the INR is less than 2, divide the patient into high risk and the low risk. High risk patients are started pre-operatively on heparin, and heparin is stopped 6 hours before the surgery. Repeat the necessary coagulation parameters and start heparin in the post-op period. If there is a low risk, there is no need to start. In the pre-op period, post-op period, heparin is started. If the INR is greater than 3, you should decrease the dose of warfarin, and the INR should come in the range between 2 to 3 and stop 4 days prior to the planned surgery and switch the patient to the heparin 6 hours before the surgery. The heparin should be stopped. What happens if there is a fetal distress and the patient is on anticoagulants and you have to take up the patient for emergency surgery? This is a very commonly asked question. To temporarily reverse the effect of warfarin, you should give FFP 15 ml per kg, vitamin K 0.5 to 2 milligram IV, and then 10 milligram IM, then 5 milligram fourth hourly. To reverse heparin, you may use protamine 1 milligram for every 100 units of heparin. Let's discuss about severe mitral stenosis and pregnancy. If it's a severe mitral stenosis, patient will not tolerate the hemodynamic burden of pregnancy. As we had already seen, what happens during pregnancy is exactly opposite to our goals, which we should try to maintain in mitral stenosis. If it's a severe MS, try considering PBMV before conception. If you're not able to do a valvotomy, please do a commissurotomy. In case a patient has to undergo a valve replacement, bioprosthetic valve is preferred. A patient who develops NYHA 3 to 4 symptoms during pregnancy should go PBMV with limited fluoroscopy, with 1 to 2 minute exposure, with abdominal and pelvic shielding under echo guidance. Percutaneous mitral valvotomy or closed surgical commissurotomy, open commissurotomy, or mitral valve replacement are the 4 surgical techniques that can be done. Who are the candidates for PBMV? if they have a mobile non-calcified leaflet, if they have no commissural calcification and little subvalvular fusion. Calculate the Wilkins scores. There are 4 grades in each of mobility, subvalvular thickening, valvular thickening, and calcification. What are the indications for a mitral valve repair? Moderate to severe MS with NYHA 3-4 symptoms. When percutaneous mitral balloon valvotomy is not available or PBMV is contraindicated because of left atrial thrombus or MR, or valve morphology is not favorable. Not available, left atrial thrombus, mitral regurgitation, and morphology being not favorable. Or severe MS with MR. What are the complications of mitral valve repair? Valve thrombosis, valve dehiscence, valve infection, and embolic events. So to sum it up, the surgical management. Mitral stenosis, if diagnosed before pregnancy, commissurotomy is preferred. Second trimester is the preferred period for any invasive procedure. Percutaneous valvuloplasty using a balloon technique has become the accepted treatment for patients even with severe symptomatic mitral stenosis. Percutaneous balloon mitral valvuloplasty provides palliation for pregnant women with mitral stenosis and has been reported 100% successful. Successful balloon valvuloplasty increases the valve area greater to 1.5 centimeters square without a substantial increase in the mitral regurgitation. Although the maternal outcome in percutaneous mitral valvuloplasty and commissurotomy are the same, fetal loss is high in open commissurotomy at a rate of 1:8. Valve replacement is reserved for severe cases, calcified valve in a mural thrombus. The maternal mortality increases from 1.5 to 5%, and the fetal loss is somewhere between 16 to 33%. This is a very common favorite question these days. What to do first? First do a cesarean section and then an MVR, or do a MVR first and then a LSCS, or both of them at the same setting. LSCS is carried prior to MVR if the fetus is of advanced age as elective surgery, or if a complicated prolonged surgery is anticipated. MVR is done prior to LSCS if there is a hemodynamically unstable mother as an emergency surgery to avoid PPH and other coagulation disorder that might occur. So what are our anesthetic considerations in severe MS with a pregnant patient? Control the heart rate to the low end of the normal, avoid tachycardia. Try to preserve or restore the sinus rhythm. Maintain intravascular volume. Avoid marked increase in cerebral blood volume. Presence systemic vasodilatation. Avoid increase in PVR. Prevent hypothermia, hypercarbia, hypoxia, and acidosis. Preoperatively, look for severity of MS, presence of pulmonary hypertension, atrial fibrillation, cardiac failure, other associated valvular diseases. Check what all drugs patient is on, what anticoagulants, whether the patient is on digoxin. If on digoxin and diuretics, get a potassium done, and any other medical disorders associated with the mitral stenosis. Our goal should be to provide adequate analgesia, minimize endogenous catecholamine release, prevent tachycardia, maintain sinus rhythm, maintain preload, avoid autocaval compression, avoid acute increase in preload. Avoid rapid decrease in SVR, maintain PCWP near the baseline, limit maternal Valsalvas and stress associated with expulsive efforts. Avoids factors which increase the PVR, cut short the second stage by instrumental delivery, and the most important line, reserve cesarean for obstetric indications. Combined spinal epidural analgesia in a laboring patient, severe MS, intrathecal fentanyl followed by diluted epidural bupivacaine 0.125 and fentanyl 2 mics per ml. Intrathecal opioid in the first stage provides excellent analgesia without any sympathetic blockade. During second stage of the operative delivery, epidural anesthesia and analgesia can gradually increase venous capacitance to accommodate acute increase in venous return and cardiac output in the immediate post-op period. So, diluted epidural bupivacaine 0.125 and fentanyl 2 mics per ml. During the second stage of labor or operative delivery can facilitate in venous capacitance to accommodate acute increase in venous return and the cardiac output. C-section only for obstetric regions can be carried out by epidural spinal, combined spinal epidural or under general anesthesia. Technique of choice, CSC has a rapid onset, improved analgesia, low dose spinal, and with the room for post-operative analgesia. So technique of choice is CSC. If there is an emergency cesarean section, modified rapid sequence induction, you can use etomidate, succinylcholine, maintain the heart rate with esmolol. You can use sufentanil if available, NTG infusion in the induction phase, maintain it with initially with 100% oxygen. You can use isoflurane. Hypotension can be treated by phenylephrine boluses. Monitoring, we should use routine ECG, SpO2, NIBP temperature, EtCO2, urine output. There are separate indications for IBP, pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, CVP, T. Mild disease, your routine non-invasive monitor. Severe disease, with which we expect huge fluid shifts. Invasive monitoring includes A-line, PSC, and TE at times. CVP will reflect your right ventricular filling pressure and will be a reliable guide for left-sided filling patients with normal LV function. In the presence of a reduced LV compliance or pulmonary hypertension, this relationship is less predictable. And it is better to use capillary wedge pressure as an index of left ventricular filling. Indication of pulmonary artery catheter, significant pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary artery diastolic pressure is not an accurate estimate of left atrial pressure. Wedge pressure overestimates the left filling pressure because of a stenotic mitral valve. In these conditions, the catheter must be inserted further than the usual due to the dilated pulmonary arteries. Care should be taken because of the increased pulmonary artery rupture. Intravenous agents, ketamine is avoided due to tachycardia. Etomidate is preferred. Thiopental and propofol can be used. We used fentanyl for induction, and N2 can be used because of pulmonary hypertension. Inhalational agents, all of them decrease the blood pressure. Halothane is no more used. Enflurane is no more used. They used to cause decreased stroke volume. And isoflurane and sevoflurane decrease the SVR. Muscle relaxant, pancuronium should be avoided. Reversal with glycopyrrolate is preferred. Regional anesthesia, fixed cardiac output states may result in profound hypotension in spinal. Epidural anesthesia, gradual fall in BP, so always better to use a combined spinal epidural. Choice of a vasopressor, phenylephrine rather than ephedrine is preferred. Vasopressor in MS maintains the SVR without causing maternal tachycardia. Oxytocin, carbetocin is preferred over methergine. Methergine cause it's contraindicated due to the increase in SVR. Oxytocin causes tachycardia. Don't use boluses. Use infusion. Post-operative care, few patients might require ICU care. You should continue to monitor the patient in the post-op period. Adequate pain relief should be given to avoid tachycardia, and all cardiac medications should be started as soon as possible. Anticoagulants and regional anesthesia, unfractionated appearance, no contraindications for regional if there is a subacute prophylaxis. Intraoperative anticoagulation 1 hour after needle placement, remove the catheter 2 to 4 hours later. If the patient is on low molecular weight, thromboprophylaxis 10 to 12 hours after the last dose. If the patient is on higher dose of LMWH, then 24 hours after the last dose. Post-operative single dose, first dose after 6 to 8 hours. Remove the catheter 10 to 12 hours. Double dose, first dose after 24 hours. Remove the catheter after 24 hours. Restart after 2 hours after removal. This is a very important slide. What are the advantages and the disadvantages really attributable to the regional anesthesia in a parturient with mitral stenosis? So if we give a epidural, if we give a spinal, or if the technique of choice being combined spinal epidural anesthesia, it avoids airway manipulation. It avoids tachycardia during laryngoscopy and intubation. Pain causes an increase in PVR, which is effectively dealt with GA, but has a disadvantage of increasing the pulmonary artery pressure. There is less incidence of TVT. It dilates the vascular bed, which serves to receive the autotransfused blood, decreasing the chance of precipitating pulmonary edema. Advantage of epidural is that it can be administered in incremental doses. Total doses can be titrated to the desired sensory level. This is coupled with slower onset of anesthesia, allows maternal cardiovascular system to compensate for the sympathetic blockade. It lowers the risk for hypotension. In situations of fixed low cardiac output, these are the disadvantages. Maintenance of SVR is necessary for tissue perfusion. It necessitates the judicious use of vasopressors. One of the disadvantages is to inability to alter the ventilation. Thereby hypoxia, hypercapnia can occur, causing the increase of PVR, which can not be dealt adequately. Securing the difficult airway in face of emergency can be challenging. Due to hemodynamic effect, individualization and titration remains the core of regional for cesarean section. Emergency precludes the use of epidural anesthesia, though the continuation of epidural analgesia into the period of labor for providing anesthesia for C-section is an attractive option. If a patient has to undergo a valve replacement with pregnancy, how an alteration in a CPB protocol occurs? Routine CPB has hypothermia. CPB in a parturient has normothermia. CPB routinely has a continuous flow. Parturient has a pulsatile flow. Routinely, we maintain a hematocrit of 21 to 24, but in a parturient undergoing valve replacement, the CPB protocol alters to keep a hematocrit above 25. Usually, we keep a low perfusion but in a pregnant patient, we keep a high perfusion, high flows greater than 2.5 liters per minute per meter square. High perfusion pressures are kept in an altered CPV protocol for a parturient. This is to improve the placental perfusion that improves the fetal acidosis and the bradycardia. What are the causes of mortality in untreated MS? Progressive pulmonary and systemic congestion occurs in 60 to 70% of the patients, systemic embolism in 20 to 30%, pulmonary embolism in 10%, and these patients have infection in 1 to 5% of the patients. So now we will be summing it up, the whole of mitral stenosis with pregnancy. With the increase in the transmitral gradient associated with clinically significant mitral stenosis, more time for diastolic filling is necessary to adequate preload. Heart rate is inversely proportional to the diastolic filling time. Low heart rates are recommended. The decrease in diastolic ventricular filling time is associated with pregnancy-induced tachycardia, which increases the left atrial pressures. The increase in transmitral gradient can further be complicated during labor. Tachycardia resulting from pain and beta agonist tocolytic therapy further decreases the diastolic left ventricular filling time. So vasodilatation from the neuroaxial blockade can also lead to reflex tachycardia. Other hemodynamic goals are to maintain the normal to high preload, afterload, and contractility. Significant decrease in the SVR, which reflects in reflex tachycardia, are poorly tolerated. Accordingly, in a case of hemodynamic instability, vasopressor of the choice should be tailored to these hemodynamic goals. Epinephrine should be avoided as it may induce tachycardia. Phenylephrine restores the hemodynamics with little or no unwanted effects on the uteroplacental perfusion. Use of norepinephrine may provide additional inotropic support without significant increase in the heart rate, while vasopressin relatively spares it. Till date, there are no evidence-based guidelines dealing with the anesthetic technique. Which anesthetic technique is optimal in pregnant patients with mitral stenosis for labor analgesia or anesthesia for C-section? Timely provision of analgesia and anesthesia, however, is essential for the reduction of peripartum maternal morbidity and mortality. Expert opinion is that the choice of anesthetic agent must be individualized. It is dependent upon the understanding of the physiology of pregnancy and its interaction with individuals' patients' stenotic lesions, pathophysiology, and severity. An understanding of the impact and pharmacological therapy will have on peripartum period and anesthetic care is essential. Because alterations in the hemodynamic status continue to occur after 24 hours delivery, adequate monitoring should be maintained from the peripartum into the postpartum period to reduce the morbidity and the mortality. Let us remain safe, continue with the webinars. Thank you.